Welcome to section 8.2, and we're going to be talking about using the distributive property. What are we going to use it for? To factor polynomials. That's what we're doing here. We're also going to do some sneaky equation solving here. Factoring means to express a polynomial as a product of monomials or polynomials. So remember, in the previous section we had factored form. And so we're trying to get things down to a prime factorization. We had no exponents greater than 1. And so we're going to be looking at some of that in this factoring. Big deal here is the zero product property with the idea of solving equations that are equal to 0. The zero product property, we can use that. It says if the product is 0, one of the factors is 0. Let me see if I can help you to understand this. If I have 5 times x equals 0, guess what x is? It's 0. There's no way out of that. If I have negative 5 times x and the answer is 0, guess what x is? It's 0. What they're saying here is if you're getting 0 as an answer, then one of the factors has to be 0. So it doesn't matter. It just doesn't matter. If I say x times y equals 0, then either x is 0 or y is 0, because that's the only way that can happen. That's why we call it the zero product property. We'll come back around to that later in the lesson. Distributive property. We are so familiar with the distributive property. We really are. I like to think of this more as the undistributive property because we're undoing what we have previously learned how to do. I'll show you that. First, let's look at this binomial. I hope you agree that it's a binomial. And let's talk about the GCF of that binomial. Remember, GCFs can have a numeric piece and an algebraic piece. Numerically, looking at 15 and 25, what's the smallest, what is the greatest common factor? And that would be 5. It's the biggest number to go into both of them. That's the numeric GCF. Algebraically, then, we look at x and x squared. And we always, first of all, they do have an x in common. They do. And we ask the question, where is it found the least? And the answer is x to the first. So the greatest common factor for this binomial pair is 5x. So here's what we're going to do. I'm going to copy the problem. And we're going to take out the 5x. What is 15x divided by 5x? 15x divided by 5x is 3. Because 15 divided by 5 is 3, and the x's cancel for thinking of division. If you need to, write it down somewhere. 15x divided by 5x. Next, we're going to do 25x squared divided by 5x. 25x squared divided by 5x. So 25 divided by 5, it's a positive 5. What is x squared divided by x? It's x. And that's the answer. And what we just did was factor a binomial. We factored in a polynomial. We factored an algebraic You've never done that before, I don't think. So let me just remind you then that I call this the undistributive property because in the old days and in the previous chapter, we would have taken and said PEMDAS, working in parentheses, all that. We'd ended up doing this multiplication. We would have done a 5x times 3, and we would have gotten 15x. And we would have done the 5x times the 5x, and we would have gotten 25x squared, which is what we started with. That's good. Okay? That's really good. Now, I want to say this. When you factor, and that's what we did here, we factored, we undistributed, because I just used distributed property to distribute it back. But this is the answer in the red box. But when you take out the GCF, two things have to be true. Nothing left in common. I'll show you an example of that a little bit later, where there is something left in common and it'd be like an oops. We do it a lot. It happens. But I'll show you one. So there can be nothing left in common. When you look inside the parentheses, you can't have anything left in common with what's left in there. And the other thing is you have to be able to redistribute and get back what you started with. And that's what I was doing right here. I was redistributing and checking to see that it really did work. Because if it doesn't, then you missed it somewhere. And it's amazing to me how many people turn in paperwork and they miss things that they should have been able to easily check and correct. And they just don't. So the first thing they did here was find the GCF. It's 5x. Is that what we said? It's 5x, right? Remember? Okay. And after they find the GCF, then they undistributed. Now they went through this kind of, don't look at that, okay? But they undistributed that, and that's what they got. And so this is the completely factored form. Moving along. Is this a trinomial? Yes, it is. So we want to use the distributive property to undistribute the greatest common factor from this trinomial. So we got to look at each of these three terms, look at the numeric parts, and look at the algebraic parts, and determine the GCF. So looking at the numeric parts, we've got the 12, the 24, and the 30. And we're talking about the GCF. What's the largest number that will go into all three of them evenly? And the answer is 6. You know, 12 and 24, it would be 12. 12 will go into both of them, but it won't go into 30, not evenly. 6 is the largest thing going to all of them. Then we look at the variables, because that was the numeric piece. Look at the variables. Do they have an x in common? The answer is yes. Where's it found the least? X to the first. Do they have a y in common? The answer is yes. Where's it found the least? The answer is y to the first. So the GCF is that. So I'm just going to copy the problem. And I'm going to take out the GCF. I want to take the 6xy out of all three of these terms. So let's start with this one. I've got the 12xy divided by the 6xy. Numerically, 12 divided by 6 is 2. Algebraically, xy divided by xy cancels. So the answer is 2. Then I'm going to take the 6xy out of this. Numerically, 24 divided by 6 is 4. What happens to the x's? They cancel. What happens to the y's? Y squared divided by y to the first is y to the first. So remember, it was 24 divided by 6, which we said was 4. And it's not just a blank 4, it's a plus 4. The x's cancel, and the y squared divided by y is y. Let me just note this up here. I just did 24xy squared divided by 6xy. I did it kind of in my head talking to you, but that's what I'm doing. If you need to write it down so you can look at it, then write it down and look at it. And finally, I'm going to take the 6xy out of this piece. Now, I've got to be careful. Remember, it's the negatives in your life that cause you the most trouble. So I'm going to take 6xy out of this. What is a negative 30 divided by a positive 6? Negative 5. look at the x's. It'd be x squared divided by x and y to the fourth divided by y.